This show contains adult content. Hello everyone, Caleb Sunstead here, your host and game marshal. First of all, apologies to my friends Allie and Doug Nesbitt for leaving them out of the credits last week. Sorry y'all, I goofed. They play Hiram and Meadow on this show, and they have their own podcast, which I'm sure you've heard me talk about to death, but if not, go to rpgforyouandme.com, check out their current campaign, Neon Heat. Thanks to Allie for playing Meadow in this episode as well. Speaking of other AP content, I was on the Orpheus Protocol for the last 3 weeks, including this week. Thanks to Rob for having me on. Orpheus Protocol is sort of a espionage cosmic horror AP that's really tightly produced and edited. Highly recommend it. And, I'm on it, so it's an easy sell now, Those episodes will be in the show notes below. And then thanks to Rob from the Orpheus Protocol. Wow, to come on this show. What a coincidence. So if you can't make it over to his feed, just buckle on up, listeners, because you're about to hear his dulcet tones. Thanks to everyone that's taken our survey so far. It's been incredibly helpful. We've got a lot of really, really useful information out of it. If you haven't taken it yet, that's also going to be in the show notes. It's going to run through a week from today. So if you haven't had a chance to take it, go ahead and take it. Any information you want to give us about why you're still listening to the show, we would love to know. Finally, this episode has an additional content warning, which is in the show notes. And with all of that out of the way, welcome back to the Weird West.
Abel, I don't ever aim to be the kind of mother that holds her boys back from the life they want to lead. I just need you to understand the gravity of this decision. I know you're young and you want to get out there and you want to make a difference, and Thaddeus left, and why not you too? I just hope the next time your brothers and I see you, that it ain't in a casket. If you go, Harp might not even remember you.
See the kid as he lays in his bedroll, his chest dripping with sweat from the day's travels and from the fire in front of him. His back is cold as the wind from the frigid Mexico desert whips against his back in the cold. We have a close-up shot of his face. The camera is level with the ground, such that his left eye is at the top of the frame and his right eye is at the bottom of the frame. The entirety of the shot is taken up with his cracked and dried face, days from the last time a drop of water touched his cracked lips. He's got a young face, maybe not even 14, the newest man in the company by many months, and none let him forget this fact. The rest of the company has found their way to sleep easily, but it does not come that way to him. It seems as if there were a spell cast over the rest of the company to protect them from whatever cruel god were to lay this weather upon the Grey Riders, and it seems to him as if he were not under the protection of such a boon. It is these thoughts and the thoughts of the events and choices that led him to this place that dominate his mind as his eyes listlessly glance around to the rest of his companions, many of which have taken their beds far away from the fire. The company's sergeant, Howard, is snoring a few feet away from him, and across the fire from him, the kid's eyes fall upon the gambler, who seems to be in a state of comfort in these terrible conditions, almost pouring out of his bedroll onto the dried, cracked earth with a smile even in sleep. But the fire glances off a metallic object, a shiny piece of almost silver, a pewter canteen that has fallen out from the gambler's coat onto the ground. It's a small thing, but it seems to the kid as if that canteen held an ocean of water ready for him to drink. The kid and the company have not had water for the last day. The last drop of water that touched your lips, Isaac, was the night before this one as you took camp. And the fact that any of your company would have water still on them, to you in this moment seems a greater injustice than the most horrific of murders. The kid's tongue rolls over his cracked lips as he glances around to the rest of his company dead asleep.
He picks nervously at a cactus spine that he can't seem to get out of his fingers. He had tried earlier in the day to cut open a cactus the way that he had heard the residents of these plains did to find water, and instead he found only more pain. As he picks at it, he debates the ease of sneaking that canteen off the gambler's chest. He has seen that man move before, and he is not sure that his own skills put him at match, but he has water. With a little glance around, everybody else is sound asleep.
From your limited viewpoint laying in your bedroll, yes.
Very slowly, very carefully, the kid will start to push that blanket off himself, gently roll over to his knees next to this fire. Socks still on. He had only taken off his boots to go to bed. He starts to crawl towards the gambler as surreptitiously as he can.
As if to spur him on, the kid, to greater confidence, as if to reassure him, the gambler shifts in his sleep with a great breath and a great sigh, subsiding into clearly a deeper slumber, slightly further exposing the canteen.
I think we need to make a stealth roll opposed by a notice roll from Rob the Gambler.
My notice appears to be a 6, but I don't know what else I'm doing.
You'll always add a d6, so you'll roll 2d6 and keep the higher result after both explode individually. I think you have a hindrance, Rob, if you want to tell us about it.
My hindrance is heavy sleeper. My notice rolls are at -4 to wake up.
That's 5.
That's going to be a 0 for me.
That means the kid beats him with a raise. So describe to us how you steal away this canteen.
The kid pushes on, spurred by both his natural curiosity, but also that deep sense of justice that he can still recall from his mother, as he stops just short and reaches out his left hand so slowly, so carefully to lift up that canteen. And then the kid slowly pulls that canteen back, feeling the weight of it, already trying to guess how much water, and just imagining the relief and happiness that will occur when he pops that lid.
Where do you intend to take this bounty to? Back to your bedroll?
No, I intend to drink it right here and put it back. The water will mysteriously disappear. The kid has been the recipient of a few beatings from other members of this crew, and he's not keen to be accused of theft. Not out here where people are looking for spare horses already.
The water of life rushes into the kid's throat as he gulps greedily before returning the stopper and carefully placing it back where he took it from the gambler's coat. As the kid turns around, his eyes look past the fire, past where his bedroll and safety lays on the ground, into the desert. The figure you see is the preacher's son. He's sat cross-legged wise on the packed ground, his weapon splayed out in front of him in pieces. On his face is held righteous determination, studying the cast metal parts like a clergy attempting to divine the greedily kept secrets of God within that structure. It seems to the kid that in this light, the preacher's son is one and the same with the world around him, like that youth were a thing painted onto the same canvas as the world itself, neither existing before the other. Your eyes meet his as they glance up to yours, and he noiselessly continues his work of divination.
I've tangled with that one before, and the fact that he's not reacting is a positive. So I'm going to continue back carefully across that dusty ground in my socks, feet, and worn-out pants, back to that bedroll, and slide in as noiselessly as possible, and then go back to trying to pick those cactus spines out of the fingers.
Minutes pass before a voice comes from behind you. What do you have a mind to do?
The kid's breath catches in his chest, and he stops his mindless picking, and he wants so badly for that question to not be aimed at himself, but he knows that it must be him who answers. I aim to stay with you all, as far as I can go.
With the water.
Oh, I needed it, and he had it, and he should have told us he had it.
The kid continues to hear the clacking of metal parts behind him moved around meticulously, being rearranged into the preacher's son's weapon. His mindings have nothing to do with your actions.
Brows furrowed in thought, the kid is trying to track this. No, look, you would have done the same if you seen it first.
A man is held only to his own judgment, except those actions which may cause another to challenge his fate. The youth's words are like stone, statements not beyond disagreement, but spoken with an assured grace that none would have cause to question if they may not have one time have been spoken by God himself.
The kid squirms uncomfortably in his blanket, trying to find the words to reply, even though there's a little voice in the back of his head that tells him maybe that shouldn't have been what he did. You know, it's on you to take care of yourself. You can't trust another to do that for you. Eventually, you're going to have to step in and take charge, and I took charge. And sometimes you got to do unpleasant things.
If your words met your actions, I might have cause to agree with you.
What do you mean by that? The kid rolls over in his bedroll to face the other youth, glare at him angrily.
He's not but 2 or 3 years older than the kid, but it seems to the kid as if the preacher's son were his elder by decades. Such is his manner and cadence, and the way he holds his shoulders like a boulder on the ground. You have greedily taken what has been destined for all of us.
It wasn't destined for all of us. It was destined for his greedy ass. You think he was going to share that with you? He wasn't. He didn't share it today. He didn't share it yesterday. He's been holding on to it. If anything, you owe me a thank you for evening the scales.
No such gratitude comes. The wind is the only response to the kid's words. He stares at the preacher's son for a good minute before it is apparent that he has no intention to reply.
Fine, you clean that gun again, I don't care. But if you ain't ever gonna use it, ain't no point in it. At least I am not afraid to act when I see something needs to be done. Satisfied with his final word, the kid rolls over and tucks himself into a uneasy sleep.
The next day, the Grey Riders, in their motley assembly, ride on the hard, packed dirt, cracked and fractured in such an immense scale that it seems to the kid as if God himself had taken a hammer and smashed the earth like a pane of glass, leaving only dead remnants behind. The riders are all many weeks out of the last bastion of civilization, and it has been even more days since they have had food than water. As we cut to a medium shot of the rebel riding next to the company's sergeant. Austin, what does the rebel look like?
The rebel's a tall man who slouches most of the time. He kind of folds his head in forward of his shoulders and rides easily on a horse, but it always seems like he's trying to make himself look smaller than he actually is. Angular is maybe the best way to describe him. He's all elbows and knees and tall and lithe. An older man, certainly compared to some of the younger members of the Riders. He's starting to gray at the temples. The lines in his face show how long he's been out in the sun and the sand before this.
Next to the rebel, on a white-gray mule, rides Sergeant Howard, chewing on a bit of tobacco. He's got his hat that's got a few bullet holes shot into it, popped back so you can see his receding hairline. His beard has grown in patches around his face, and he wears a almost perpetual scowl on his face. He is the kind of man that you find when you are in need of killing, and none that have met Sergeant Howard have had want to describe him further. Howard and the rebel both look down at the tracks in front of them, a set of wagon wheels following a mule and perhaps a few other horses. In the distance, there is a glint of something. Howard looks up and calls the rebel's attention to that.
You see that up there?
You mean the glint up there?
He spits on the ground.
Yeah, I figure it to be a wagon. Maybe a horse. What do you figure?
Well, if it's the same thing that left these tracks, I think a wagon's a good bet.
Looks like they stopped. Let's see what we can do. Get the boys to gun up.
I tell them.
The rebel pulls his horse around and moves back to the rest of the company. They're not far behind you. You're 2 less than you were yesterday, your Apache scouts having abandoned you in the night, likely because they didn't like your chances. The camera follows over your shoulder and kind of pushes over to where the kid and the gambler are riding side by side, much to the kid's chagrin. What do y'all look like?
The gambler is tall and lean. Nearly everything about him in his features as well as his bearing challenge the harsh landscape around him. He is clean-shaven with an almost feminine full mouth, an aquiline nose, long black hair held back in a ponytail when he's riding, not a hint of weather on him. No sunburn despite the slightly pale cast to his skin, and not a line on his face. He rides in silence, save for the occasional ringing, tapping sound that a perfectly manicured fingernail makes against the empty canteen as he taps, and listens to the sweet tone that it makes, smiling a slow and secret smile to himself.
The kid rides next to him, someone who did not grow up on horse, but who has become familiar by no choice of his own over the last several years. His hat is not his own, clearly, recently taken from someone else. The gun at his waist hangs too large on a belt that doesn't have enough notches to get tight enough for his waist. It claps uncomfortably, chafes and rubs against his leg with every step of the horse. He's been trying to make awkward conversation with the gambler, both to cover his guilt and to also hopefully ingratiate himself to someone who he sees as a gateway into true membership in this group.
Come on, boys. Everybody get your gun. We're gonna go see them. That means you too, Cactus Muncher.
The kid looks around and just trying so hard to pretend that it's not him, but dutifully pulls his gun and looks at the gambler. You ready? I'm ready.
The gambler's eyes settle on those of the kid for a second longer than is comfortable, and one of the gambler's eyebrows drifts lazily upward, just a bit. He makes no move for any weapon, but no one who looked on him could say he wasn't ready.
The riders take off at a slow trot with the confidence of men that kill casually. We cut to the riders coming upon this wagon. One of the wheels has been broken, torn off by the immensity of their travel across this desert. 2 figures stand near the wagon, awaiting your arrival. 2 Mexican women, one of them pregnant. As you approach, Howard turns to the rebel.
Hey, see if they got any water up there. Take the kid and whoever he's got with him, and we'll see what he can do.
The rebel will turn around and motion and nod towards the gambler, and then take a moment and wait for the kid, and when he doesn't respond, give him another look, and then sigh. Kid, that means you. Get up here.
Oh, yeah. He spurs his horse eagerly forward, perhaps naive to what he's about to need to do, and rides up besides the rebel.
We're gonna go see if they have any water.
Okay, I'm ready.
You sure?
He hesitates for a moment as if perhaps he wasn't ready for that question and is hoping that there isn't another trick being played on him. I am.
Well, you ride on up there. We'll follow you.
The kid spurs the horse forward, and as he approaches, he squares his shoulders and mutters a little self-encouragement to himself. All right, sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do. He pulls the hat down and pulls the pistol forward to be clearly visible and then lets it dangle at his side. Hello.
Your word is met with no reply or recognition. One of these women is probably late teens, early 20s. The other one is like in her 40s. They just stand there, their clothes blowing in the dry wind.
You got anybody else around here? He's gonna kind of scour to see if they really were riding alone, where their horses go, or their oxen, whatever we're pulling this thing.
The kid pulls his horse around for a moment to look at the front of the wagon. Whatever mount was attached has been taken off, and you can see some tracks leading off in the direction that they've been traveling this whole time, you and your company in pursuit. So it seems whatever horses or mules they may have had have been taken away into the desert.
Can I see anything down that direction that leads me to think there's a river or a village or anything down that way?
The flat land just moves off into the horizon. Nothing but the hard-packed dirt next to that blue sky and the relentless, merciless sun beating down on you and the land both.
The kid takes the reins of the horse into his right hand along with that pistol and takes his left and reaches up and scratches the back of his neck, rubbing away some of that sweat that's running down, mixing with that dirt, beginning to itch down his spine. Regards the two women for a moment. He's not entirely sure what to do, but he knows that coming back without water is not really going to be an option. Is anything in the wagon, or has the wagon been emptied out?
You pull your horse around to the back. It's kind of hard to see off your horse. If you wanted to make a notice roll from your horse, I think we'd make it at like a -1. If you want to dismount and sort of peek inside, it'd be a flat.
No, he's going to stay mounted. That gives him a feeling, of separation and power being up on that horse. It's a little easier. So we'll roll notice, which is a d6. 5 minus 1 is a 4.
The wagon is almost completely empty. Looks to be like some bags of clothes, perhaps some tools, along with some empty baskets.
He leans over the side of his horse to spit and then realizes, 1, he shouldn't do that, and 2, he doesn't have the saliva in that sticky, dry mouth to actually register his proper disgust. Grimaces and kind of stands up in the stirrups to holler back, "They got nothing. Some baskets."
Well, nothing ain't good enough. Go see what's in there or find something.
Son of a bitch.
What'd you say?
He dissed me. I said, son of a bitch.
I hope for your sake that's not directed at me. Now get off your goddamn horse and figure out what's in the wagon.
There's a lot of talking over there.
Oh, shit. He hops down. When he hears Howard's voice, hops down off the horse and steps on up inside. The rusty metal creaks and groans as he gets inside with a big squeak, and he starts angrily kicking things around, looking for anything. He stomps on the floorboards, see if there's a hidden compartment.
One of the women moves around to the back of the wagon and watches you with no expression on her face. Make another notice roll for me.
4.
As you stomp around, it doesn't seem like there's any hidden compartments, but we cut over to where the gambler sits confidently on his horse, and you can see whatever the kid's tantrum inside the wagon has knocked loose something that's been hidden underneath the wagon that falls to the dusty ground below.
The tapping on the canteen stops in between beats, like a heart attack. Wordlessly, the gambler smoothly dismounts his horse and walks slowly toward this dislodged object, keeping his eyes on whichever of the women is standing nearest to this newly discovered item.
The older woman eyes you cautiously as you approach. She doesn't seem to move to pick it up or anything. Perhaps her and the younger woman have not noticed.
And so the gambler makes his way directly next to the wagon and slowly reaches under it, keeping his eyes on them the whole time. A hint of amusement playing across his face.
As your hand reaches under, you see an old shirt stained with blood from months ago, wrapped around a few objects inside of it. A string is wrapped around, holding it together like a bindle. We cut back inside to the kid. Your search is fruitless, Isaac.
Son of a bitch. Howard is not gonna like that. Is there anything of value in here? Remotely useful. A shirt, a sewing kit.
Why don't you tell me what object of arguable value you find?
As the kid kicks around, he finally, in a corner, what he thought was just a pile of rags, he kicks and he can tell it's a canvas-wrapped package of some sort. He reaches down and tears it open with eagerness, only to be slightly disappointed when he finds that it's just a blanket inside. A nice blanket. But as he knows, if you come back to Howard with nothing, that's much worse than coming back to Howard with at least something. He holsters the pistol and walks to the back of the wagon, shouts out, "Hey, Howard!"
Howard does not reply. However, as you come to the back of the wagon, you see that the preacher's son is halfway between you and him, having been sent to find out what was taking so long.
With a sigh, the kid readdresses himself. Turning to the gambler, not eager for another confrontation with with one of his rivals, the kid says, "Hey, look what I got. It's a blanket. Pretty nice. I don't do a lot of quilting, but it's got colors."
The gambler smiles at that and holds up the tied bundle of cloth.
The kid looks down from his perch on the wagon and then hops down to stand next to the gambler. I guess we found a lot together.
The gambler presses the tied bundle into the kid's hands. When they get here, maybe you found something useful.
His eyes light up with gratitude and admiration for this gesture. And then the flash of guilt for stealing that water last night. Okay. He takes it greedily, turns around. Is it clear what's in there?
Inside, as the preacher's son approaches, the kid pulls open the string top to look inside this veritable treasure in the middle of this wasteland. You find a canteen that, as you shake it, is probably a quarter full of water, in addition to a few scraps of hard tack and a few morsels of jerky, broken bits in the bottom of the sack. The preacher's son rides up. The immense youth looks down at the kid on the ground. What'd you find?
Little water, little food. Not enough for all of us, but, it's better than nothing. And, real nice blanket.
What took so long?
What's the hurry?
The preacher's son looks around to the dried wastes around him and then looks back to you.
I meant, where'd you find it?
Inside the wagon.
He looks to the two women, adjusting himself in his saddle.
What do you aim to do with them?
Kid turns and regards them. I don't know. I ain't thought about it. I mean, they're doing nothing, I guess. I mean, we're just riding on through.
Well, you best think about it.
Okay.
What if someone were to come back?
I guess maybe they would. I don't know.
Preacher's son looks to the gambler and back to the kid.
Do 'em in.
He turns his horse and starts to trot back to Howard.
The gambler strides with a bearing that commands a certain attention over to the two women, standing so that he is on the opposite side of them from the kid. He levels his most serious and empathetic gaze at them. The gambler's Spanish is not great, but he doesn't need fancy words, and his tone carries a powerful freight of both command and comfort. He asks the women, "What is it you want to happen here today?"
The older woman speaks with a pleading tone in words that are hard for you to understand. She motions towards her pregnant daughter, a pleading tone in her voice. She points with a hand towards the tracks that lead off from the wagon into the desert. And the only notion the gambler gets is that they just mean to wait and that help is coming.
Behind them, now as they face away from him, the kid shifts that bundle over into his left hand and hesitantly but purposefully draws the revolver from where it sits on his hip and slowly raises it with a hand that only trembles slightly.
As the gambler continues to speak to the women, his eyes touch those of the kid for just a moment, not long enough for the women to see and be signaled that he's making eye contact with someone else. He looks thoughtful, and he says, "I'm afraid, like so many others, you just can't read the cards that you're holding."
2 rapid shots ring out over the desert, the echo coming back many seconds later off the distant hills. As the kid slowly lowers his gun, that acrid smell of gunpowder stinging his nostrils as he stares at now the lifeless forms of these 2 women. He looks over his shoulder to the preacher's son and then forward at the gambler, his eyes hoping that he did the right thing and looking for any reassurance that can be offered him.
The gambler gives a lazy stretch. "You know, the little one did never know a moment of pain, nor want. Had a better life than any of us did." It's beautiful if you think about it.
The tracks lead off into the desert, and the gray riders follow them in solitude. The meager rations and food they acquired split immediately between the group, making no difference to their disposition or want for water. We find them as they come across a town burnt to black. A jarring, jutting web of scorched remains, not a building left untouched in the whole place. The tracks you have been following have led you here, and the rebel rides in front, Howard in the back, and the kid and the gambler following close behind the rebel and the rest of the company in between those 2 groups of motley figures. Even the ground here seems to have been scorched by the fire that razed this town, and you're not sure if it was recent, but either way the smell of burnt flesh touches your nostrils as the rebel starts to ride into the town. Your eyes glance around you, and I think on some of the buildings there's splotches of color. It seems as if someone has come after whatever apocalypse found this place and has set their own will upon it. Mosaics of brightly colored, haunting, and disfigured figures are painted everywhere. Some with paints dyed with things in the desert, and others maybe of blood. Figures screaming in agony, but all of them looking up to the sky as if someone were to come and save them. We cut back to the kid as he looks at these paintings. It's almost as if the town swallows you. There's no difference between any of the buildings. Whatever their purpose was in the time before they found this fate has long been lost in the immediate fire that took this place so recently. I think a lot of you come to a halt in front of a building larger than the rest, with one tower peering from one side of it that's been turned to black but towers above the rest of the town. Perhaps it was a church or a school, something. Whatever it was, it has been lost. But on it, mixed in with these many mosaics, are strings of Spanish words, phrases written about. And I think a lot of you sit there in silence atop your mules and horses for a few moments before the wind picks up and the kid reaches up to hold the hat on his head before once again it dies down into the bleak heat from that sun so far above.
The kid squints against the brightness and shifts uncomfortably on the horse. The oppressive heat doesn't just bring temperature, it also drives the creatures of the land underground or far away, seeking any shade. So that oppressive quiet, other than the sound of their own hooves and their breathing, is the part that sticks with him the most as they stare at this burned out husk of a building. He looks to the gambler riding at his side. Do you mean what you said back there about better not to be born?
I suppose everybody should make that judgment for themselves, but I want you to think about it for a moment. Who've you ever met for which that's not true?
Well, damn sure ain't these people. He points down at a few of the burned out bodies. I bet they reckon they would have liked to not do that.
Well, I think it's awfully presumptuous of you to assume that you're the one who should be the judge of that.
Well, who else would be? A man's got to determine for his own self what the world around him is. If you let somebody else determine it for you or decide the course of your ways, you're just going to end up broke in a little shack somewhere out there with no man with you and more kids than you can feed. At least that's what my ma said.
Well, your ma sounds like a wise woman, but it ain't your place to choose what happens to people.
Why not?
Well, how would you like it if they did it to you?
They can't. They're dead.
At this, the rebel shoves the kid as hard as he can over his saddle and tries to get him to fall and have his feet caught in his stirrups.
Austin, Isaac, let's roll some opposed fighting rolls.
I just blew up my D4 fighting dice into a 5.
Wow.
Well, I have a D6 in fighting and nothing else that would help me. Old snake eyes.
So, Isaac, why don't you just take control over what happens here?
As the rebel reaches out to press him, I think the kid almost sees it coming. He knows this guy's headed out for him. And perhaps he almost anticipates it a little much. And that canteen, though empty now from everybody having their one sip, still hangs from his saddle horn as his prize. And he whips it like a lightweight little mace and just smacks loudly against the rebel's chest. Not enough to do harm, but enough to prove a point. The kid stares at him. You try and touch me again, and I'll show you sadness to be alive.
That's a good threat coming from a little shrimp like you. Now get off your fucking horse and go find us some water. And he turns his horse around and huffs off back to talk to Howard, a little more hurt by that than I think he realizes.
The kid looks to the gambler for any sort of moral support.
The gambler breathes in, smelling the ghosts of dead smoke from long dead fires, and says, I find myself wondering about the source of his certainty, shooting a look the way the rebel has departed, because I think nobody chooses. Every man takes in fuel, burns it, and one day burns out. I don't see what a man is beyond a fire that burns slow enough to consider his own burning. Still, we should see to the water.
Considering this, the kid nods and rides into the village looking for water.
The kid doesn't make it far. Maybe makes it around the corner of one building before he's stopped by the immensity of the painting in front of him. Or perhaps painting is not the right word, because nothing has been drawn upon this charcoal black building. The soot has been scraped away to reveal whitish gray underneath. Whatever building this was, it has provided a canvas that is maybe 12 feet tall, 6 feet wide, and an immense figure looms above you, a spindly woman. Every curve has been morphed and exaggerated into a sharp angle. This pokey figure like a massive thistle brush looking down on you in a black billowing dress, huge shoulder pads with skulls carved into them. Her face has been covered with a dark veil which, upon closer inspection, appears to be meticulously carved individually individual finger bones forming like an almost bead curtain in front of her face. She's got a small black hat on, and written in blood around her as if framing her in a massive doorway are the words, Ella nos quiera a la próxima vida.
The kid leans back in his saddle, taking all this in, pushing that big hat back on his forehead. He whistles quietly under his breath.
And then the kid gets shot. They rolled an 8 on their D8 and a 6 on their D6. You will genuinely not believe this. They rolled into an 8 and a 6.
I don't know if you guys have played a lot of Deadlands, but this is how characters die in one roll.
23. Fortunately, with shooting rolls, only the first raise counts. And when you get a raise on a shooting roll, Robin Austin, you add a D6 to the damage. Isaac, I'm real sorry. I hope you can soak this, man. The kid takes 12 damage.
I want to spend a Benny to soak. So I roll a vigor for that. Unfortunately, I rolled a 1 and a 2.
Would you like to spend another Benny? Let's do some math.
So I'm taking 7 damage, which is 1 raise. So it'll be shaken plus 1 wound, right?
Right.
But if I'm gonna spend a second Benny to re-roll this roll because I rolled a 1 and a 2. That's just garbage. Of course, I rolled 2 2s. It's just not meant to be. What am I being shot with?
Rifle of some type.
As that crack of a gunshot rings out, the kid lurches back in his saddle and rolls off, landing hard on his chest on the ground. Dust kicks out as he hollers in pain and tries to scrabble and crawl his way towards the nearest pile of wood as he takes a wound.
We're not going to be in combat yet. You scramble up to this building and nothing happens for a few moments. You breathe in and out, look down at your bleeding wound. Please make a notice roll for me. It's just one shot in the middle of an echoing town, so this first shot's going to be a -4 to notice where it's coming from.
I rolled a 4, -4, -1 for the wound, -1.
You have no clue. Your ears are ringing with the blood rushing through your veins.
Can I hear the sounds of my troop coming?
That's a good question. We cut over to the gambler who perhaps has stopped to admire one of these murals as you hear the shot. I think for you it would be even a harder roll, but if you want to make it anyway, you could at a -5.
Notice roll? Nope.
You do hear a gunshot, however. So does the rebel. It echoes through this broken thing of a town, and you're not sure where exactly it's coming from, but it's happened.
Process of elimination doesn't make it too hard to know who might be the recipient of that gunshot. So the gambler takes off in the direction that the kid had just recently gone.
The rebel has made it to the edge of town when he hears this gunshot. What would you like to do, Austin?
I think he's rubbing his chest and muttering to himself angrily, and as soon as he hears it, it probably is far enough away to not pinpoint, but he is just going to wheel his horse around and look, and then after a second, start riding back in at not a gallop, but a pretty fast pace, not knowing whether that was one of his own men or not.
We cut back to the kid, his back against this wall, checking the ammunition in his gun, and then once he's assured himself of that, he looks around to his surroundings.
So the kid's back is to that wood. He's kind of doing that like scrabble down, like trying to get low. He's holding one hand up to his chest, looking down nervously at where he was shot, and he's got the pistol out in the other and trying to kind of like do the quick little peeks around that corner. Although everything here around it just is so alien and strange that it would be hard for him to notice anybody in it. I will look though. Still -4?
Yes.
Well, the good news is I got to 0 this time.
Nothing springs out at you except as you look around to these haunting figures turned more grim with your adrenaline pumping through your veins. It occurs to the kid that if he dies here, these murals will be the only witness to his death.
He starts hollering out for the other riders. Hey!
The gambler has no problem tracking down the source of the yells of the kid, and you pull your horse through the streets. What's your approach to the kid look like, Rob?
The gambler rides brazenly, seemingly unafraid of anything that may come his way, although if one were to see him closely, his eyes are darting from potential firing position to potential firing position, being wary while giving the appearance of ease.
He rounds one corner and he sees two figures. One on the right, the kid huddled against one of these buildings, sheltering, and on the left, a figure that almost stands like the Grim Reaper, this massive painting of this spindly woman on the wall opposite from him. And he only has a few moments before the same gunman takes a shot at him as well. He's going to be getting a total -2 to this. He gets some benefits for setting up and then negatives for your cover and the fact that you're on a horse. So his 9 becomes a 7. Fortunate. You were only hit without a raise. Oh my god. Well, you take 15 damage.
Well.
So what is your toughness?
6.
2 raises, shaken, and you would take 2 wounds. You can attempt to soak with a vigor roll by spending Benny.
I suppose I'll give that a shot. Well. Wait, how does blowing up work before I say anything?
If you roll the maximum result on a dice, you roll it again and add it to the result of that dice's total.
What if I roll an 8 and a 6?
Blow them both up, and then you just see which one is higher.
Ooh, I like that.
Yes, that is a satisfying mechanic.
So my vigor roll on this Benny is a 13.
Wow. So every success and raise soaks 1 wound. Once you soak both of them, you're no longer even shaken. So unlike the kid's frail body, you were fine. Do you think the bullet misses you? Do you think it hits some clothing? What do you think it looks like?
I think the bullet hits an empty canteen with a very, very loud sound that echoes through the square.
Both the gambler and the kid can make a notice roll at -2 now that they have a little bit of triangulation going.
6 blows up. 11.
Your ears draw your eyes to a rooftop very nearby, maybe 1 or 2 buildings in between you. They don't quite have a view of the kid, it would seem, from their vantage point, and you can't quite even make out who they are on that rooftop. You just see the glinting of their rifle barrel in the hot noon sun as they move to pull themselves behind cover and perhaps move into the building they're atop of. Austin, you get an ace of spades. Rob, you get a 4 of clubs. Isaac, you get a 5 of spades. And the gunman gets a 3 of diamonds. Austin, the rebel, you were first. So I think we see this glint in the gambler's eye. And then we cut to the rebel on his horse as the second gunshot resounds through this town.
Do you think I need to make a notice roll to figure out where that was, or is it obvious?
The gunshot is hard to distinguish, but the kid's incessant yelling is easily would bring you to where he has found cover.
He wants to get his horse in front of the kid and provide some cover and then take a shot at this gunman, knowing that the gambler is on his way to deal with it.
Ooh.
I don't know what that would be.
That would be hard to accomplish, but I think it's worth trying. This isn't exactly how it works, but what I'd like is a riding roll at -4. And either way, you're going to get to the kid. But if you are successful, you could take a bad shot. And if you get a raise, you could take an okay shot.
I do have the edge, steady hands, which makes me better at shooting from a horse. I have a D8 in riding. I blew up an 8, a 7, so a 15 total.
Give us some hot flavor of the rebel's riding skills, man.
The rebel hears these 2 shots go off. The first one, he pulls around, unsure whether that was one of his own men or something else, a threat. And on the second shot, and then hearing the kid start hollering, he spurs his horse into gear and stands up slightly in the saddle, rapidly getting into town and looking alley to alley, rooftop to rooftop, trying to find the source of wherever this gunman is, till he spots the kid huddled down in front of some kind of painting. He doesn't take long enough to look at it and really consider what it is, wheels his horse up in front and stops and starts to look around, eyes darting everywhere, breathing rather heavily. Maybe he's scared, maybe he's adrenaline flooded, but he is ready to defend whatever this is.
I think in order for you to take a shot, you also need to make a notice roll. You do have the advantage that the gambler is currently looking at that target, so I think it's just a -1 for you.
3 with the -1.
I don't think your eyes manage to catch him in time. The gambler will likely be able to take an action first.
Maybe he'll spare a glance down to the kid and look at the wound on his chest. They get you good?
Yeah, I'll be fine. Just gotta... Can you see him? Shoot that son of a bitch.
Well, I'll find him. You keep pressure on that. We don't have enough water to put any blood back into you.
Emboldened by the arrival of his allies, the kid rolls over to his knees, still crouched behind this wood, and he's going to just scan the horizon looking for this shooter.
Notice, -1.
4 minus 1 is 3. I'm looking. I don't see him. He waves the pistol menacingly across the horizon as he keeps scanning. I don't know what he's doing. Is some kind of... He's got a rifle or something.
Then we cut to the gambler's smiling eyes.
The gambler turns his horse slowly and rides up alongside this mural, very close, leaning aside in his saddle so that his fingers can trail along the wall, his fingernails raking flakes of ash into his palm. He gathers this small handful of ash and soot to his mouth and whispers into his hand, then lifts his hand, opens, and lets the ash and soot hit the wind, and it's carried unerringly to the hiding place of the shooter, and I will be casting Fear. 6 blows up. 6 blows up.
Damn.
5. 17.
3 raises. He's going to get a -2 on his spirit roll to resist this. And then also, I'll say if he fails the fear roll, I'll roll twice and I'll let you choose the result. 0. He's going to roll 2d20s. He's going to add a +2 to this result, which means it's now possible for him to have a heart attack. You can choose a 16 or a 1, so I assume you're going to choose a 16, which becomes an 18. The character gains a minor phobia somehow associated with his trauma. So we cut up to this rooftop where this man that is covered in ash, head to toe. The only thing that has a glint of a light shade on him is the whites of his eyes and the red on his fingertips from the paintings of blood he has done in the previous days. He pulls his rifle back and crouches down as he moves on this rooftop, half of it caved in as he moves to a ladder he set up just hours previous. And as he tries to get to that ladder, starts to scramble onto it and looks down at the 2-story drop below him. And that's when he is overcome by this hex of the gambler.
The sharp particles of ash and dust and soot and broken, burned splinter crawl like biting mites into his eyes, burning and blurring his vision, darkening it until all he can see is the widening and widening smile of the gambler, who to his eyes seems to have more fangs than teeth, like a slash of jagged moonlight inexplicably arrived in the middle of the day.
His fear quickly turns to panic as he attempts to scramble down this ladder. I'm going to make him roll an athletics roll. He scrambles down the ladder a bit too quick, his foot missing a rung, and as he loses his grip and starts to fall backwards, we cut back to the gambler as you hear a crashing coming from inside the building that was the target of your hex.
He breathes a satisfied sigh and sits easier in his saddle.
Oh my god. Oh my god. He takes 17 damage from this fall.
Oof.
So I'm going to spend one of my GM bennies. We're going to try to keep him alive here. He blows up a 6. That's a 13. He's good. There's a crash from inside this building.
So it's clear what building he's in now?
Yeah, the building is very nearby, maybe like 60 feet away from you.
So what the gambler will do is he will motion for his companions to go in one way as he goes in the other. and he will be whistling a resonant, warbling tune to make himself conspicuous and stoke the fear that he has set in this man's heart.
Let's have you make a performance roll. And you can get +1 to this roll since you are the target of his phobia.
Well, in that case, I do get a 4.
Are you trying to provoke him into running? Or are you trying to provoke him into attacking?
I want him preoccupied with how I am going to enter the building and, get ready to defend himself from that, and just to not have any concept of my allies coming up behind.
Okay, yeah. The kid and the rebel see the gamblers set off in his careless whistling as they move to the other side.
Hustling along beside the rebel, kid looks up at the gangly figure. We gonna get this guy?
Yeah, we're gonna get him.
Good.
You know how to use that gun more than to shoot pregnant women with?
Hey, fuck you. And they hustle towards the building. Just try and leave him alive. I need words with him.
We follow the rebel and the kid as they sneak up on this building. The echoing, haunting tune the gambler has found upon his lips, aiding their mission of murder. I'd like both of you to make a stealth roll. With Rob's result, both of you can get a +2 on this.
3.
Blew up a 6.
That wound penalty.
9.
Isaac, would you like to spend a Benny, or are you comfortable with failure? You got 2 left.
I'll spend a penny. That puts me at 6.
We see the gambler riding through these blackened streets, slowly, so slowly atop his horse, and he glances down one of the streets where he can see his allies moving parallel, and then he sees them overtake him on the other side of the building. We see this door that's like half held onto its hinges, made of leather, one of them burnt away by the fire, one barely holding on to life as they move to either side of the door. Looks are quickly exchanged between both of them until the door is moved soundlessly open by the rebel. 2 figures have their back to you. One is near the far door, and the other is much closer to you. The one nearest you is the figure described before, bruised and broken from falling into a pile of rubble on the ground here. The hot sun is lazily bringing its light through the half side of the building that's missing a top. He's hunkered down behind some old slab of stone whose purpose has been made obsolete by the inferno in days previous. He's holding a gun on the opposite door, the one where the gambler would make his entrance if that were his plan. And then beyond him, much nearer that far door, is a child, maybe 7 or 8, standing almost directly in front of that far door, holding in his hands a large double-barreled shotgun. It appears as if neither of them has heard or seen you.
Which one you gonna shoot? I'll shoot the other one. We better do it at the same time.
You gonna shoot the kid?
He's got a gun.
He's 5.
Fine. You go wrestle it out of his hands and I'll shoot the other one.
Fine.
The kid looks at you with a little bit of disbelief, but okay. Carefully aims and fires.
You're getting a +4 from having the drop.
Blew up to 6. 11 plus 4, 15.
So you're rolling 3d6 damage, and then because you also have the drop, you're adding 4 damage on top of this.
Blew up a 6. 19 damage.
I will spend his last Benny to attempt to soak this. This is a trait roll, so he's going to get a -1 from his phobia. Failed. 3 wounds. So he is on death's doorstop as you take this shot. Where do you get him?
In the neck. Like in the side of the neck, shoots him through the throat. So he is bleeding out, soon to be dead, but perhaps has just that little bit of life left in him.
His scream fills the interior as he drops to the floor. The child may be starting to turn wide-eyed around to you. What does the rebel do?
As soon as the kid squeezes the trigger and lets off a shot, it's like a starting pistol, and the rebel lurches forward, trusting that the shot will be true, and runs as fast as he can towards this kid, trying to make himself look big and get within range to snatch the gun away.
I think we should do an opposed agility roll, and whoever rolls higher would get to act first. Unless you would like to take some other action, I think that's what it's going to be.
That sounds great to me.
Luckily, this is a small child, and he is not a wild card, so he is rolling a d4.
That's good. I have a D8 in agility. It's the only thing I have a D8 in.
I will spend 1 Benny for this child. He blows up a 4 into a 6.
I got a 5. How badly do I want to get shot by a kid?
Not super, huh?
I only got 2 bennies. I will spend a benny to... Do I get to reroll both die?
I will offer you an alternative. You
Okay.
can spend a Benny, or it's close enough, and he's a kid, and you at the drop. If you want to change your mind, you could just shoot him. He reels around, this shotgun in hands, locked with a terrified visage on his face. You can spend the Benny or not, man. Up to you. You got 2. Oof.
He's going to spend the benny. Like, maybe he looks back as he sees the kid drop this other figure and blood spray out of its neck, and just looks at the kid and the look in his eyes and looks back at this child, and he really doesn't want to shoot this kid. Okay, I got a 7 at least on a D8.
Okay, you get to act first. What would you like to do to this child?
Snatch the gun away, maybe not very nicely, like just jerk it out of his hands.
Okay, I think that's an opposed fighting roll, which should be trivial, because he's got a D4, naturally. 2.
I rolled a 1 and a 2.
Well, in the case of a tie, you are both locked, kind of unable to accomplish your goal. So I think what happens is, like, the kid springs in, shooting this older man who falls down in a squirt of blood. You leap over his dying figure to rush in towards this child holding the shotgun. You grab the gun and try to pull it away, but he backs up. So it's not that you don't have a grip of the gun, it's that he's backing up away from you, and the barrel is remaining mostly pointed at you. He glances down to his trigger, and I think what we're going to do is give the kid, Isaac, a chance to act.
He sees this in front of him and just, man, there's a moment's hesitation, and then thinks to himself, no, he chose his path, and he aims and fires.
We cut over to the rebel locked in this conflict, and as the child pulls away from you, you can see his loose shirt flutter open, and you can see the dynamite this older man has strapped to his chest as a living trap against any that would come to seek his doom as the kid takes his shot.
I blew up my shooting die. 11 to hit.
Yeah, that is a hit with a raise.
10.
The child is both dead, and the explosives laid upon him by his uncle may do the same to Austin. Austin, you are locked in combat with this child. I think you do have time, once you see the dynamite and you realize the kid is about to take a shot, to reactionarily maybe get away from him. So I think I need an agility roll. I think how we're going to do this is it's going to be 4d6 damage, and then every success and raise you get will remove 1d6 from that damage to you.
All right, here we go. D8 on my agility. I blew up the D6. 10.
Wow. So you're only going to take 2d6 damage. You take 4 damage, buddy.
My toughness is 5.
You do not even become shaken. What miraculous series of events leads you to get away from this child before the events that are about to unfold?
As the rebel attempts to wrestle this gun away from the child, at the last second he manages to pull it away and looks as he hears in rapid succession the crack of a pistol going off and then an explosion as he's blown backwards, bodily through the door, splinters flying everywhere, and lands and slides along the ground and sits up, hearing just a ringing in his ears as he puts a hand up to his left ear and pulls it away with blood coming out of it, and tries to work his jaw back into place and looks around for where the kid went.
Back inside, the kid and the would-be assassin are both also going to take 2d6 damage. For both of them, it's unavoidable. The man is on the ground, kind of unable to move, and the kid's last action was taking a shot in clear line of sight.
Mm-hmm.
The kid takes 3 damage, so probably not even enough to shake you. And the man on the ground is probably concussed to death. We cut back to the kid as you're rocked by this dust and soot that rushes out towards you as you take the shot. You take a few steps back out of the building, sputtering and coughing, and then after a few moments, start to catch your breath and look inside to the wreckage. The child you just shot is gone. The other man that shot at you and wounded you earlier is lying bleeding on the ground. A pool of blood formed around his head, and you can see the slow spurt, the pitter-patter of his heart come to a stop. And it's a still, uneasy silence as these black dust motes start to settle in this unearthly chamber.
The kid's staggers forward, trying to shake that ringing out of his ear, pistol hanging loosely in his hand as he moves up to the assassin lying on the floor. This man is dead.
You reach down, kind of feel at his mouth and at his neck. Yeah, there's no sign of life. If he does have any, he certainly is not going to last long enough for a conversation.
Fucker. The kid stands and kicks him with some derision in the stomach, and then uses his boot to push him over onto his back to see if there are any pouches or pockets in his vest or coat or anything that he can rifle through.
You manage to come up with a coin with the face of some unknown saint, a few bills of a currency foreign to you, and then what is the one useful thing you find on him?
With that shot, he had enough to reload his pistol one more time. And I think perhaps he just finds a fistful of bullets, if you will. The kid was running low.
And I think as the tinnitus hum and whine in the kid's ears subsides, it resolves into the final parting strain of the strange song the gambler is whistling outside.
Thank you for listening to Sounds Like Crows, and thank you to our patrons that made the show possible. Thank you all so much, but specifically this week, I'd like to thank Tim Ruiz, Mo Skell, Ethan Saperstein, Wade Bernier, and William Stepro, along with You Know 'Em, You Love 'Em, our harrowed patrons, Jonathan Turner, Aaron Blackston, Jared, Kyle Neese, Ariel Weiss, and Greg Gray. Thank you all very much again. Not possible without you. Special thanks this week to Ariel Weiss, Gary Oswald, and Renee Wenger for consultation on this episode. Meadow Crow was played by Allie Nesbitt, who you can find on Twitter at YouSeeTheHat, or look for her show, RPG for You and Me, in whatever podcatcher you use. It's a wonderful show. I listen every week. Thank you to Austin Holt for coming on and playing the Rebel. You can find Austin on our Discord server at Alchemist. Ping him, let him know he did a good job. You also can find him on our Game of Thrones series on our Patreon. Music this week was done by James Quinn, Rudy Zuniga, or myself. The Kid was played by Isaac Sunstead, who you can find on Twitter at Able the Crow. And finally, thanks to Rob Stith from the Orpheus Protocol for coming on and playing the Gambler. You can find him on Twitter at Lord of the Stith. Stith spelled S-T-I-T-H, or you can find his show on Twitter at Orpheus Protocol, or search Orpheus Protocol in whatever podcatcher you use. Check the show notes down below for the episodes that I guested on his show. We got to be players together. There was a guest GM. Normally he GMs, but we had a good time together. Start his show from the beginning, or check out those episodes specifically in the show notes. You can find me on Twitter, folks, at Marshall Caleb. Email the show at soundslikecrows@gmail.com, or use the contact forum on our website, soundslikecrows.com. Our show's executive producer is Alexandria Majin. Thanks, Alex. And that's it. We'll see you next Monday.